Hello, everyone.
Hey there, listeners.
This is Amanda.
This is Rita.
And you're listening to
I Don't Know Her,
the podcast where we talk about women and other folks.
That you probably have never heard of.
But you should have.
And you will.
God damn it.
Because we're going to make you.
Going to force you right into your ear holes. So, Rita had a big weekend.
I did. I celebrated my son's 12th birthday, and we did this whole shebang. We hid from him that he was getting a secret trip to the West Side, to Olympia. We stayed at my parents' house, and he's always wanted to go to the Boeing Museum of Flight. That kid loves planes like nobody's business. So we surprised him, hit the road. Everybody was there waiting for him, our family. Cake and pizza, and he got presents. He got a brand new bike. He got to go to the museum. You should have seen his face. It was just like glowing. He was like, Mom, this is the best birthday I've ever had. And I was just like, well, baby, I love you. And I was like, and your family loves you. And just so happy to celebrate. But something kind of unexpected happened while I was there. I have gone back to therapy. You know, I've been open on the podcast of like my struggle with addiction, self-harm, and my mental health. And now I started seeing like some patterns that I had recognized before. And so I was like, okay, it's time to go back. Mm-hmm. And I've been working with my therapist on some of those feelings that are coming back to the surface. And I was running it across her of like, I really wanted to apologize to my family because when things were really bad, they were bad. And I put my family through a lot and my friends. And I feel like I am so far away from them that they saw me as this mess that I was. And then all of a sudden I wasn't. And they didn't get to see the progress or what I was doing here. Like, that you and Abby have been able to witness and my husband. So I just wanted to apologize to them. And so my therapist asked me, she was like, what is this going to do for you? Because she's like, I know you're a people pleaser and you are very insecure. You need people to like you and love you. I've admitted to that. And she's like, what is it for you that you get? And I said, well, I just want to be able to acknowledge it to my mother, especially, and to my father, because now that my son's getting older, those things rip you in half, the things that they say to you. And I don't blame him for the things that he says. And I know my parents don't blame me, but I just felt like it was needed. It's just always, I felt like it was always like in the room and we would just do the niceties and talk about the weather and just not really dive into how are you doing inside and stuff. I feel like they almost thought, like, we don't want to bother her. You know, she's working on it and that's all that we need to know.
Yeah. And if they say something, maybe that would be a trigger or whatever.
Yeah. And I don't want to be a bomb, you know, sitting in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
That makes me uncomfortable. And so what I wanted was, I felt like it was a step to heal on both sides and just start over. So we were all sitting outside having a barbecue and the opportunity presented itself. So I just let my family know that I was sorry and that I love them. And I appreciate that, especially that they were there for my husband and son as support. And we just all started crying. And I looked at my mom and I just said, especially you, Mom, I said, I hurt you, the things that I've said, the things that I've done. I just forgive me, please. And she was like, that's already been done. Like, I forgave you long ago. She's like, I wasn't even mad at you. All I wanted was you to be happy and healthy. And like, she came up to me and I just like wrapped myself around her waist and cried like a little girl. Yeah. And I was just like, I'm sorry. Oh, now I'm crying now. It was a big deal.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
It was a huge deal. And I felt like something released.
And Do you feel like a weight's been lifted?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's not easy and it's not always the way for other people, but I know that this was something that I could do because both parties were, you know, willing and in that place. I was just really thankful for it. And yeah, I just keep crying. I was in the car coming home and I was just like, I just started crying again. I was just like, I feel like it's coming out.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't control it.
Yeah, you released the dam.
Yeah. And my whole family, my sisters got up, my brother-in-law got up, and they just like we all hugged each other. And it was amazing. I was really glad that it happened. I love my family. They love me. I know it's not perfect. It's not supposed to be, you know. But it was a big deal for me, definitely.
Well, I'm proud of you.
Thank you. And I have always been a person that can hold a fucking grudge to the point where it's eating me inside.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with grudges is that they do more damage to you than they do to the person that you hate.
Yeah.
Or are holding some kind of problem against.
And I knew, you know, during that time when I was acting out and doing these things to my family, I wanted to hurt her. I just wanted to see, like, honestly, I like just wanted to see her hurt as bad as I was hurting. And so I did as much as I could. And it was really hard for her to get through.
I think I recognize that. I've done that myself. I have a harder time with my mom. I don't know that I'd ever be able to apologize to her. I think we're a little too much alike in certain ways. And one of those is that I think she thinks I owe her an apology and I think she owes me an apology.
Your situation is so different.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, yeah. I don't mean to compare them. They are totally different. But I just think it takes a lot of maturity and strength to go to, I think, especially parents.
Yeah.
Because often, you know, even if, I think you see it in your own kid, even if, like, you love them or whatever, and you know you were in the wrong, it's so hard to apologize because you're like, but how about the 35 other things that they did that hurt me forever?
Yeah.
And I think that becomes easy as a kid.
Oh, and I'm like that. I've got a file in my head with everybody's name on it. And I'm like, you did this in 1995 when you said that to me, that my hair was ugly. I still remember that. Like, I do that. I catalog everything and I carry it with me. But like, situations are different. Like my husband and his mother, if he was going to be like, you know what, I'm going to go try and reconcile with my mom, I would be like, no.
No, you're not.
No, you're not, because that woman is toxic and he has a very broken relationship with his mother. They haven't spoken in over 10 years and it's for a good reason, because she is not good for him. And so that's a different, you know, relationship. The parent-child thing is, man, it's rough.
It is. It's a hard road to navigate. But I'm really glad you did that.
I am too.
I think especially as you're doing this thing for Esai and he's on this cusp of young adulthood, I think it's important that you did that right now. Because you know things with him are going to get harder as he gets older and more independent and sassy.
Yeah. Definitely. So I am preparing myself for that. And I guess I'm just starting to really, you know, my son is getting so big and his thoughts are getting big and his personality, he's turning into this young man. We hit a milestone, by the way, when we were over there. My mom bought him some jeans and they were like jeggings. They were skin tight. And so my mom was like, let's go back to the store while you're here and we'll have him try them on and it'll so that we can
get the right
size. So we're looking in the boys and can't really find anything. We went to Old Navy looking in the boys and I said, you know what? Let's go to the men's section. And so we went to the men's section and he is now wearing men's jeans.
Oh,
I know. And I was like, what happened to the stretchy waistband?
those little elastic waistbands.
Yeah. They had the little buttons on the inside with like the little... So yeah, it didn't dawn on me. And I was like, well, let's go try the other side of the store, you know, not the kids section. And he was like, oh, cool. He's like, these fit great and they look good. And I was like, wow, okay.
Now he's going to be a young adult.
Yeah.
Which, don't worry, that lasts like another 10 years, so you're good.
Right.
He won't be a full-fledged adult until he's at least in his 20s.
Yeah. So if anybody out there is having parenting woes or family woes, it's just, you got to take care of yourself and do what you need to do for you.
I'm also glad you went back to therapy. I'm in therapy as well. And what was tough was because of the quarantine, I had more time.
Mm-hmm.
And now that school is back in session, I am competing with everybody else who has to have after work appointments.
That's right.
And so for a while there just wasn't anything. And then their office called me and was like, okay, well, if you want it, you need to call right now because we have an opening every other week.
Oh, jeez.
So, and that's fine. It's just that like every other week sometimes doesn't cut it.
Mm-hmm. It is I love therapy now. At first I was like, who is this person? I don't believe in this, but whatever. I'm doing it because it'll make other people happy, which was, like I said, I try to make other people happy. And then once I got in there, I realized here's a room where I can put all my shit out and tell this woman how really fucking crazy I am inside my head and say it out loud. And then I can leave it in that room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can hear from someone else who doesn't have anything to do with your marriage or your family. Be like, if you want this to be the way you want it to be, then you need to do such, such, and such, and such. And you go, oh. As if you're being told some secret of the universe. And it's always, for me at least, almost always something very obvious.
Yes.
That like, if I thought about for 5 more minutes, I might have gotten on my own. But that's the thing about therapy is that it's often, you absolutely have to have someone who doesn't, I call it a stake in your happiness. Mm-hmm. Like they don't have a stake in my job, my marriage,
they're not trying
to
win or lose anything in your life.
I don't have to worry about trying to keep that together. It's just, hey, this thing you're going through, let's get through it. And we're going to do that step by step. I love therapy. I recommend it for everybody.
Me too.
Okay, so it's my turn this week. We are still doing the 1 person per episode, which I personally have been enjoying.
I have as well.
It meant that Rita got to come straight into town, drive over here, and start recording and not feel like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? Mm-hmm. So I have wanted to do this person, as I said in our last episode, for at least 2 seasons. So I'm very excited to talk about this person. And this is extensive, and I'm going to do my best not to make this like an encyclopedia.
Okay.
entry. So please break in at any time. Ask me questions. I know way more than what's on these pages.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Alice Guy-Blaché?
No.
Okay. Well, Alice Guy-Blaché was basically the world's first filmmaker.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. And you love film.
I do. So background on me is I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before, but I initially, when I was a young kid, just desperately wanted to be in movies as a director or what have you. And that was like my life goal. And my senior year, it was very clear that I could not afford to go to an out-of-state school. Mm-hmm. And there was only one university in our state that offered a film program, and that was Montana State in Bozeman. And they have a very good film program. Mm-hmm. It's excellent. And so I applied and I got into film school. And then I did this thing that I have regretted ever since, where I believed that my dream was stupid and it was silly.
Oh.
And that I would never get a job. What was I thinking? So after the first year, I dropped and I switched to English because it was the only thing I'd been good at in high school. Mm-hmm. So that is like my background. And I still to this day wish that I could go back in time and stop that person and be like, no. Mm-hmm. You've wanted to do this since you were 11 years old. and now you have this opportunity. And the truth is, I loved film school.
Mm-hmm.
I loved what I did. So it's really upsetting that I let that sort of, I don't know, this like responsible monster take over. And I realize that there are lots of people listening right now. They're going to be like, well, you still can. And I think that that's always a great optimistic point of view, but reality is much different than our dreams. And
Yeah.
it is almost impossible at this point in my life to start over. Especially because I'm the person who makes the money in our family.
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of being like, I think I want to switch careers. I'm going to drop out of my life. So that's the background of my film love. And so there's a lot of stuff in here that I was like obsessively going down rabbit holes about. So if I'm like at any point, you're like, hey, we don't need that much.
Reel it in. Reel it.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Alice Guy-Blaché. So Alice was the fourth child born to Emile and Marie Guy. Alice's parents were not a romantic or a traditional partnership. Alice's mother, Marie, was a student in a very strict Parisian convent. And I guess that was pretty common for like girls of a certain upper class, I think.
They would go to the convent to learn?
Yeah, and they would live there. So she was going to school in this very strict Parisian convent and got removed. That's all that, and I got this directly from Alice's website, which is run by her trust.
Ooh.
So it just said that her mother was removed from this convent, and her parents arranged for her to marry Emile within 3 months of her removal from the convent. So I'm guessing she must have gotten into some trouble of some kind.
Yeah.
And they decided she needed to be
just married
settled down.
Married off. Yeah.
Emile was 10 years Marie's senior, and he was a successful book publisher and bookstore owner in Chile. And that's where he lived. He did not live in France. He was from France, but he lived in Chile.
Okay.
So Marie, who had never left Europe in her entire life, was on a boat headed to South America within days of marrying Emile.
So he came and got her, and they married, and then they're going back.
Yes.
Okay.
The first 4 of their children were born in Chile, but when Marie was pregnant with her 5th child, which was Alice, she insisted that this child be born in France. It's very insistent.
Okay.
And according to Alice's website, there is some speculation that Alice was not actually the product of her parents' marriage, that family lore has it that she was maybe the result of an affair that her mother had with a Chilean vaquero, which is a cowboy.
Yeah. Vaqueros.
Yes. So that's pretty fun.
That's a morsel. Yes.
And I think that's why she insisted that Alice be born on French soil.
Okay.
Because if she was born in Chile and had a Chilean father, then she was Chilean.
Yeah.
And not French.
Yeah.
So Marie had her wish granted after a 7-week voyage to France, where she gave birth to Alice Ida Antoinette Guy.
Whoa.
On July 1st, 1873.
I thought only Mexicans did the 4 or 5 name thing, but
4,
okay.
5, 6, 8 names. Alice's mother went back to Santiago to be with Emile and left Alice in the care of Alice's grandmother, who lived in Switzerland. So I find
Odd.
all of this real odd. Like, I don't know why she didn't take her baby back with her to Chile. I don't know what was happening there.
So 4 kids, 3 boys total, and 1 girl?
No, there's Alice, and there's 2 sisters at least.
Okay.
1 brother, and I'm not sure about the 5th.
Yeah, what would be the reasoning? Almost like she just wanted like at least one of them to get out?
It kind of made me wonder if that family rumor was true, because if it were, then perhaps this man she might have had an affair with would be like, that's my daughter and I want her.
Ooh, so get her as far away as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Alice is raised by her grandmother in Switzerland for the first 3 or 4 years of her life. And her mother returns to get her and brings Emile. And that's the first time that Alice meets her father. It's when she's 4 years old.
Okay.
When Alice is school aged, though, so they go back to Chile. She moves to Chile with her mom and dad. But when she gets to be about school age, 6, her father accompanies her back to France and enrolls her in the Sacred Heart Convent in Switzerland, which was near the French border.
Okay.
And that's where her 2 older sisters also went to school. So like I said, there must be some kind of like tradition of girls going to school in convents, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, things began to turn sour for Emile, her father, when a series of natural disasters and political instability were going crazy in Chile. And it resulted in his bookstore chain going bankrupt in 1884. And then, shortly after that, her brother dies after a long battle with some kind of illness that wasn't clear. Mm-hmm. And her father then follows shortly after that and dies in 1886.
Oh, wow.
So in a matter of 2 years, they've lost their income, they've lost one of their sons, and they've lost their father.
Oh, geez.
And Alice was the youngest child. And it seems like there was quite an age gap because she's the only one at this point after their father dies who's left at home. So she's 13 and the others are all like 18 or older, and her sisters marry and move away. And even though she's just a teenager, it becomes very clear that Alice needs to get the family going.
Yeah.
Like Alice needs to be the one who's supporting the family. Her mom gets one job and is like fired or something shortly after. I think she might have been a little bit not all together.
I mean, if you get hired and fired super quickly, you obviously couldn't do the job properly.
I can't remember if she lost the job or if she quit the job. Something went wrong pretty quickly because she'd only had the job for, I think, a couple of months. And so then after that, it was like, Alice has to get a job. Alice has to provide for the family. So
a lot
family,
of pressure.
Yeah, it is as a teenager.
Yeah.
But that's very similar to what happened to Ida in our last episode. She had to just fucking buck up.
Make it happen.
So a family friend suggests that Alice look into becoming a secretary or a stenographer, which was at the time a really good job for a middle class or upper middle class young woman. So she's hired first at a factory and then sees a job for a secretary position at a photography supply company. It's more complex than that, but that's the basics. It's like they made and sold equipment for photography.
Okay.
And so she goes there to interview, and she's supposed to be working, like interviewing for this position that is supposed to be the secretary to the head of the company, which is a guy named Felix Richard. But instead, like Felix is there or something. And so the like next guy down, who's like one of the partners, Leon Gaumont, is the one who sees her and interviews her. Now, you may not know the name Gaumont, but if you're a film person, you'll know Gaumont.
Okay.
They are the oldest and still like the oldest film production company that's still in business.
Oh, wow. And still to this day?
To this day.
Still in business. Wow.
So she interviews with Leon Gaumont, and he likes her immediately. But he says that she looks very young, to which she replies, "Sir, it will pass."
It'll fade.
Believe me, it'll pass. So it was fortunate, though, that she gets hired by Leon, because soon after, he becomes the sole owner of the company, and then he calls it Gaumont, like before it had been called something else. Her close connection with him also means that she gets to be present during one of the most important, if not the most important moments in the history of film.
Ooh. Her personality at this time, is she fairly like social? Or was she a little bit more of a reserved person or serious?
I think that she was not terribly social at this time. I think as soon as she finds her calling, she becomes quite a lot more. So on March 22nd, 1895, Alice Guy and Leon Gaumont are invited by the Lumiere brothers. Are you familiar with them?
I've heard of that before, yeah.
To witness the demonstration of what they're calling the cinématographie, which was a 35 millimeter motion picture camera, the first one. And they, well, not the first camera, but the first time that they are going to project a motion picture.
Okay.
And so they hung a sheet on a wall, like we would for a Super Bowl party. And they projected a motion picture, and it was just a few seconds, and they called it Workers Leaving the Factory. You can probably gather what it was.
Workers Leaving a Factory?
It really was. And everybody in the audience was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, because it was moving. Yeah.
And Gaumont, though, is kind of the Lumiere brothers competition. And so this was like kind of like a
Why would they invite
measuring
their
contest.
Okay, so for me, I would keep that under wraps for so fucking long and then blow it out of the water. But these guys are going like, come and look at it. Is that what they're doing? Yeah,
kind of. They're like, because there was actually a little bit of a competition or rivalry that was already happening.
Okay.
Think about the space race.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knew that we all had this one goal and everybody was competing, you know. So like Edison, the Lumieres, Gaumont, they were all working towards doing this thing, which was getting a motion picture camera to project on screen. So they did it. And there was a rival company, a rival to the Lumiere brothers, who made another motion picture camera. And so immediately after seeing that, Gaumont signs a contract to get that made for his company.
Okay, so somebody has it in the works.
Yes.
And now he's like, I'm going to do this.
So nearly all of the first films made in those early years were what were called demonstration films, and meaning they were just observing things, like workers leaving the factory. But Alice had become Gaumont's office manager and was like in on the ground floor as they're building this. She was so good at just everything, basically, that he would have her in all of the important meetings.
Yeah.
Not just as a secretary, but she would be like, what about this? And like helping him make business deals.
She seems like a problem solver.
Oh, for sure.
And like creative as hell.
And ambitious. I don't think she knew she was ambitious until this happened. So instead of filming everyday things, she thought, why not film something cool, like that you make up, that you create?
Yeah. Something entertaining?
Yeah. There you go.
There's the word.
A story? So she asks Gaumont for permission if she can get one of the cameras and film her own scene. And he's like, no, I don't think so. But she kind of like, I don't know, works her way, works the magic. And he finally agrees as long as her work doesn't suffer.
Okay.
Which means she has to do everything on her own and not
her own time.
Yeah, not during her work hours. So Alice wrote down her idea for her film, and she basically begged, borrowed, and stole from everybody. She had a friend a guy she knew who was a painter, to come paint a set for her, which I thought was pretty bright in the first place to have this set painted. She asked her friends to come be actors and actresses. I'm going to show you the first
cool.
film because it's pretty neat. And this is, it's really cute, honestly. And so this is done in 1896. This is a long ass time ago.
Holy shit.
And this is Alice's The Cabbage Fairy. So I'm going to show it to you.
Cabbage Fairy. Sounds like a drug. What did I just watch?
It's a little weird. It's a little weird, right? So explain it.
Okay, so it's this lady, very nice dress, and she's, raising her arms up and down like, look, at magic almost, kind of like a very theatrical. There's big cabbages in rows, and she pulls out a real baby. And she kind of holds it up and then lays it down. And the babies are crying. And when I say babies, there's more than one. She pulls out more than one. And then she does a little magical thing again. And look at this. And then it stops.
Yeah. And it's only a minute long. But yeah, it's the Cabbage Fairy. And the Cabbage Fairy pulls babies from heads of cabbage, which sounds very familiar to me as a child of the 80s.
It was basically, I'm like, that's Cabbage Patch Dolls.
I swear to God, I don't know where this idea came from. I don't know if she created that, if that was some kind of folklore. I was actually going to go down a rabbit hole and figure that out. And I thought, okay, you've got 9 pages of notes already. Let's chill out.
We'll do this on our own hour and we'll see where this story started.
Maybe we'll add that as a little mini-sode.
It's pretty though. The cabbages are, it looks like a decent set. It's really neat looking.
Yeah. The guy that painted those actually goes on to become a pretty famous French painter. So
it looks good.
But she filmed it in her own garden. And, so she had to carry all of this incredible equipment.
Where'd they get the babies?
Somebody volunteered to. That's what I said. Like, she got her friends to be actors. I was like, and by actors, I mean they gave their babies to her. I don't know.
Can I borrow your baby for a film?
For just a smidge of time. Don't worry, they'll be fine. They'll just be laid naked on the ground.
Oh.
But in any case, it's the first time that we know of that any kind of narrative was put on film.
Interesting.
Therefore, it is the first movie ever made.
Holy moly.
And it is made by Alice Guy-Blaché. So Gaumont is very impressed with what he sees when she makes this, and he promotes her to head of film production in 1897.
Get those promotions.
Yeah, head of film production.
Wow.
It's a big fucking deal.
Was there another woman that had ever been put in that role before?
This is the first film, so no.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
She is the very first female executive.
Wow.
A female producer. Alice is thought to be the only female director during this next 10 years. Actually, like 11 years. And she was really bold and innovative in the things that she did. She's credited with what eventually becomes the fundamentals of narrative storytelling in film.
Really?
In fact, I watched this amazing documentary about her called Be Natural, The Untold Story of Alice Guy-Blaché. And it's executive produced by Jodie Foster and a whole bunch of other really well-known directors and actors. And in it, they actually showed a picture of one of her screenplays side by side with a screenplay from today. And it is extremely similar.
Really? So like the structure of it?
And so she's basically the one who created the structure.
Wow.
Yeah, this is why I was like, we have to talk about her, and it requires a whole episode. So Gaumont wasn't the only film company at the time that was producing films. Every company had its own signature sort of style. And Alice, because she was head of production at Gaumont and the most prolific writer, director, and producer, is the one who originates what becomes known as the Gaumont house style. She receives her first filmmaking award in 1900 at the Paris Exposition Universelle.
Ooh, what did she win?
Some kind of best film award at the exposition.
Very cool.
And it's also at this exhibition. Oh my God. The curse.
Dun, dun, dun.
It was your problem, not mine.
I'm not even going to try.
So it's also at the Paris Exposition Universelle that she picks up a copy of the Tussaud Bible. Have you ever heard of it?
The name Tussaud sound like Madame Tussaud?
Yeah,
like
not Tussaud, Tissot.
Tissot, then no.
So the Tussaud Bible is this Bible that was illustrated by this incredible French painter and illustrator. And it's later in his career. So he's already been a very famous, well-known artist across the country and in the world in some regards. And he decides to illustrate the Bible. He takes all of these key scenes and he creates paintings and then puts them in a book.
Okay.
And it's really brilliant. Maybe after the show, I'll show some to you. They're really cool. And she picks this up and is blown away by this Bible. And she's like, wouldn't this make a great film?
Oh.
But it's 1900. And the things in those paintings are far more beyond, like far more advanced than what she has the capability of doing. So just put that in your pocket.
Okay.
So meanwhile, there are some advances being made in the film industry, including a new device that Gaumont creates called the chronophone. And the chronophone was one of the first devices to make films with synchronized sound.
Oh, cool.
So what they did is they had these songs that were pre-recorded onto wax discs, which in and of itself is like mind-blowing to me.
How do you even put it on a wax disc?
I don't know. And then those were made into phonographs.
Okay.
And then the record was played back while the actors are being filmed, and they would lip sync to the recording. And everything had to be obviously synchronized to a T. Mm-hmm. And these eventually became called phono scenes. And really, when you think about it, they're the first music videos. Because that's exactly what people do for music videos.
Absolutely. When you're on the soundstage, they blast your song and, I mean, they're dancing and mouthing the words.
And that's exactly what her films were doing. There's actually this, in the documentary I watched, there was a really cool moment where you actually are watching Alice direct one of those. Somehow, for whatever reason, this is not a thing that like you would have thought they would have done at the time, which was to have another camera on set that was filming the filming of it.
Yeah, that's basically a documentary.
Yes. So there
That's
she
wild.
is coordinating these two gigantic machines and all of these actors and the set and the crew, and she's doing it all herself. She's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So Alice's films were pretty big successes, and so Gaumont was able to actually invest and build a new, larger studio. And so for the first time, Alice was able to start hiring assistants and crew members. She ran weekly production meetings. She hired and supervised other writers and directors and designers, while also writing, directing, and producing her own movies, sometimes 2 to 3 a week.
Oh my goodness.
So most of the movies that she made were shorts, so they were all like under a few minutes. But things are starting to change in the industry right about the 1910s. So in 1906, that's when she decides, hey, I think I could make that Tissot Bible into a movie.
She's going to try it.
Yep. So creating this film would not only require a lot more sets and actors and scenes and everything.
The amount of stuff that they would need.
Yes. It would also be the most costly film that Gaumont had ever made, the company. So Gaumont was reluctant to even have this be made because of how elaborate it would be. Mm-hmm. But he trusted her idea. But he basically was like, if you fuck this up, you're gone.
You're done. Yeah, it's over.
Because you're going to bankrupt me if you don't.
I mean, movie companies do that now.
Yes.
They're like, I know it's a lot of money, but I'm going to make this movie great. And it's like,
people are going to love it.
Doesn't go that way.
It sometimes does not. So, you know, when you're a powerful person, I think there's always going to be people who have it out for you. And she had a couple. And in fact, while filming The Life of Christ, there was a crew member named René Ducot who, for whatever reason, didn't like her, was pissed off at her. I don't know. But he actually slashed all of the backdrops and destroyed many of the sets.
What a dick.
Right? He claimed that he needed like some of the things for his house because his house was like in disrepair.
So he slashes backgrounds?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
I mean, it was just a bad lie. But yeah, he like tore up the sets. They had to redo all of them.
Something like in my mind, I would imagine, I bet they were working or doing something and she challenged him on something and his little ego got hurt. And so I'm going to fuck up your shit.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, we're not talking about some magical time when the patriarchy wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in France. It's the early 1900s. This is when, like, remember when we talked about bicycles being like a big deal and like you couldn't wear pants? I mean, you know, he does not like taking direction from a woman, I'm sure.
I'm probably 100% that was the situation.
So this, of course, because everything has to be redone and they have to redo some of these shots, they have to redo all of this stuff, it goes way over budget.
Oh, no.
And it had already been a pretty expensive venture, so going this far over budget is devastating. And even though the staff worked overtime to recreate the sets, it was expensive. And the heads of Gaumont were furious with Alice.
Why'd they have the idiot pay them damages?
I guess they thought she should have been able to prevent it.
Okay.
I don't know. And they had every intention of firing her. They were like in the process of firing her ass when the head of the board at the time, who was Gustave Eiffel, as in the Eiffel Tower.
Holy shit.
Stepped in and saved her. And was like, no, Alice needs to stay. She's the best person we have for this job. So The Life of Christ, this movie that she made, had more than 300 extras on set.
Whoa.
Had more than 25 scenes and contained some of the earliest special effects in film.
Wow.
And in fact, there's the scene of the resurrection when Christ is floating above the tomb. And the scene in the Tissot Bible is very vivid. Like, I would love for us to to post a side-by-side of the Tissot Bible and the still from the scene, because she did this camera technique that she fucking figured out. Maybe she had seen, like, at the time, all of these film companies were constantly watching each other's films and stealing their ideas. So it would be very understandable if that was somebody else's idea first, but this is the first time it's done as well as it's done. So she does this technique where has the camera positioned in such a way and at such an angle and moves it in such a way that it appears as though the actor is rising.
Oh, but it's the camera that's moving. Mm-hmm. It's an optical illusion, yeah.
Yes, and uses lots of black negative space to make it appear even more so. And she was able to do that on her own. I mean, I think that's incredible. And that actual technique that she does in that film is still used in movies today.
Oh, whoa.
So destruction of sets was not the only issue that people would, like, that was a huge problem at the time. As I mentioned, like, thievery was a big deal. Like, it was happening all the time. In fact, it was really common. Like, let's say Rita had a production company and Amanda had a production company, and Rita made a little short about a dog jumping over a well, right? I see that and I go, I'm going to make that too. And I make the exact same film, frame for frame.
That's like so cheap.
Isn't it weird?
It is so cheap.
I'm like, imagine if any other art form did that. Imagine if, like, you were...
I wrote this song. I'm going to write the same fucking song.
Yeah, exactly. Like, not just similar or using similar ideas or themes. Exactly word for word, chord for chord, the same song.
Crazy.
So, it was real weird.
It's like, we could at least, like, maybe change it up. Make it another animal. I put a spin on it.
It was also just such an experimental time. You know, I think they were all just learning from each other. And they were, like, extremely competitive.
I can imagine.
You know, everybody wanted the people to come see their film. So if that film did well, then we'll just make a film just like it. And then they'll come see ours too. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't the only issue, though. Most of the time, the stuff was stuff like that, where they're making a replica of another film. But in the case of Alice, there was actual theft. She kept having her scripts disappear. And so she ended up putting a lock in her desk drawer and locking her scripts in there. And they were still disappearing.
Huh.
And so one night she stayed behind and, like, hid to see what the fuck was happening and caught a night custodian stealing her scripts from her desk drawers. And then he would take them to rival companies and sell them.
No.
Shady.
These guys are bastards.
Oh, it gets
so fucking shady.
So much worse. So the same year that she made The Life of Christ, she also made a series of little travel films, like you would think of, like, a nature documentary type thing.
Okay, yeah.
Or a cultural documentary. Like, she would go to Spain and she would film places in Spain on location, which was also brand new. That was not a thing that had ever been done before, was filming in another location. So she was making these films, and one such film was shot in the south of France. Her usual cameraman wasn't able to attend that film shoot, so he was replaced with this new boy named Herbert Blaché. And they two of them connected immediately on set. But it sounded like Alice was like, "You're cute and all, but no thanks." I'm paraphrasing. But she did not, at the time, really want to take up with him.
Yeah.
It was clear, though, that they had an attraction for each other. But she was like, nah, that's...
Yeah, she might have been busy.
Yeah,
like,
I got shit to do. So they don't meet again. Actually, when she gets back, all of the footage is absolutely unusable. And so she's like, that guy sucked at film. Like, he couldn't fucking hold the camera.
She doesn't respect him.
It was all blurry. Like, it literally wasn't usable.
Oh,
like, he didn't know how to pull a focus. Anyway, so she doesn't meet him again until she's in Berlin, and he is, like, for whatever reason, Gaumont had decided to put him in charge of those chronophone.
Oh, okay.
He was supposed to be, like, doing chronophone stuff, and he can't, for whatever reason, can't get the machine to work. So
sounds useless.
I agree. He sounds like a total, I don't know, dweeb. Anyway, Gaumont flies Alice to Berlin.
To have her show him.
Yeah, to have, probably not flying. I don't know. That was probably too
Train.
early. Yeah, probably took the train over to Berlin to help with the chronophone. And that's when their romance really takes off. She finally is like, okay,
you wore me down.
And by Christmas, the two of them are engaged.
Oh.
And she actually, surprises everybody and puts in her letter of resignation at Gaumont.
What?
Yeah. She's like, I have to be a wife now.
No.
Yeah. So it was pretty commonplace at the time to put the company logo of your films in your films, like in the background of the scenes.
Yeah.
And so the Gaumont logo was a daisy, and it said Gaumont in the middle. It actually for a long time had LG, which was like ELGE, which was Elge.
Okay.
But it was also Leon Gaumont's initials.
Oh, okay.
But then they actually put the word Gaumont in the middle. And so this daisy became like their signature, like everywhere. People, even now, it's still the flower is still their logo.
That's really cool.
And so when she stepped down as the head of production, Leon did a goodbye for her, and he wrote, "You have made the Gaumont company bloom."
Oh, that's sweet.
I know. So Gaumont asked Herbert to go to the U.S. to promote the chronophone. Like, that was the purpose. And so now the two of them are going to move to Cleveland, of all places.
Okay.
To try to sell the chronophone. And they go to the U.S. Herbert sucks at selling the chronophone.
Oh, Herbert.
So, I don't know.
She's like, fine, I'll do it.
I mean, Herbert seems like the kind of guy who just clearly is not good at shit and yet continues to fail upwards.
Yeah.
Because then Gaumont hires him to be the manager of his film studio in Flushing, New York.
That's odd. Do you think it was a way to still keep her near? Maybe?
I have no idea. I'm like, why would you keep this guy? Clearly, so far, track record, not great.
Hasn't proven much. Yeah.
He must have been doing, I have to believe he must have been doing something okay. So it's that year that Herbert gets put in charge of the Gaumont Film Studio that Alice gives birth to their first child, a daughter named Simone. I love that name.
That's a beautiful name.
Alice begins to notice that the Gaumont studio is not really being utilized as much as it could be.
Yeah.
Like, it's got a lot of empty time. So she decides, fuck it, why not? I'm going to start my own production company.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to say she's like, I'm going to go back and work for them again or something.
No, she starts her own. She starts her own company called Solax, and she rents the studio space from the Gaumont. And in 1910, she writes, directs, and produces her first film from her own production company called A Child Sacrifice. Mm. It's actually a really cool little film about this, like probably early teens girl who's dying, and her younger sister, like she's told that like her sister is going to die as soon as the leaves have all fallen.
Oh.
So this little girl is like maybe 7 or 8, starts tying leaves on the tree so that they don't fall. It's a really sweet little film.
Yeah.
And that was also something that was kind of unique. Like, children had been in films before, but they always were like, they weren't really acting. They were just like props.
There. Yeah. They were the cabbage babies.
So to have a whole movie revolve around a child. I forgot to mention this earlier, but I do want to make sure I say it. That Life of Christ film was 30 minutes long.
Yikes.
So that was, again, like she had prior to that been making these shorts, which were always around 5 minutes or so.
Did that film do good?
It did do well.
Okay.
So it saved her ass.
Oh,
yeah. Because she would have been fired if it hadn't done well.
Yeah. And
earned back that money. So she makes this film, A Child Sacrifice, which is a commercial success. People love this movie. And that makes Alice be like, all right, I'm going to fucking kill it now. So she starts producing at least one film a week and sometimes up to 3.
A week?
A week.
Holy crap.
And her films are distributed internationally all over North America, South America, and Europe.
So she's like cranking it out.
She really was prolific. Solax is so successful that they actually outgrow the Gaumont studio. It's too small for them. Mm-hmm. And so Alice and Blaché decide to buy a huge plot of land in Fort Lee, New Jersey, which was where all of these film studios were. It was the first Hollywood.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I didn't either. I did not realize that Hollywood came later.
Yeah.
That there was like all of them, like Paramount, what eventually becomes like Columbia, all of these huge film companies were in Fort Lee, New Jersey first.
It'd be interesting to figure out why it like went to the West Coast instead.
Oh, that's in here.
Oh, okay.
So she has this huge plot of land and she decides to build a new state-of-the-art studio. And this is in 1911 for $100,000.
Yikes. So they had some money.
Well, yeah, because she makes bank on her films.
Yeah.
So, Lucas, tell us what that would be in today's money. So, again, it's $100,000 in 1911.
$100,000 in 1911 is the equivalent of $2,778,688.95 in today's dollars.
So just a few months after her studio is open, she gives birth to her second child.
Baby number 2.
A son named Reginald. But that means that she was building this huge ass state-of-the-art studio while pregnant.
She was pregnant, yeah.
She was releasing those films while she was pregnant.
Wow.
She's a serious badass.
Yeah, she gets it.
She's not a present mother, as you might imagine.
Well, she's working.
She's busy.
She's providing for her kids. How about that?
Their production rate at her Solax Studios was insane. They averaged at her new studio 3 movies per week.
Sheesh.
Which means that some of the time there was more than 3 per week being made. They worked with the most popular actors of the time and employed designers and crew members who were considered to be the top of the game. She actually got people from Gaumont to move to her studio. She got people from France to come over. She got people from other rival studios to come to her studio.
Wow.
She was
making it happen.
Yeah. And one of the things that she had that a lot of people didn't have was she had this huge sign in her studio, huge, and it said, "Be natural."
Okay.
And it was a sign for the actors. Because this was pretty unconventional at the time, this be natural thing.
Yeah.
Because people didn't really understand the difference between acting on stage and acting in front of a camera.
Yeah, because early on it was theatrics. It was theatrical. It was overacting. And, instead of just being sad, you were, contorting your body. And yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it was super overacting. And that's why a lot of those early silent films can sometimes be really hard to even watch because they're
they're hokey.
Hokey, yeah. So she understood implicitly that film acting required more subtlety. And so that's why she hung this giant sign, "Be natural," for her actors. She was always asking them, tone it down, be more natural, act like this is real.
Be believable.
Yes. So that was a big deal because it made her movies better. Mm-hmm. And so people wanted to go see when it was going to be an Alice Guy-Blaché film, folks wanted to go see it. So under Alice's direction, Solax became the largest pre-Hollywood studio in the United States.
Wow.
And she rivaled fellow filmmaker D.W. Griffith in production output. Do you know who he is?
No, I don't.
I'm going to talk a little bit about him.
Okay.
If you're a film buff or a film historian, you will know that name.
Okay.
Her company was so successful that Alice was taking home $50,000 to $60,000 a year in income.
Holy
Personal income.
Personal income.
In 1912.
That is amazing.
Uh-huh.
That's a lot of money.
Lucas, how much money is that today?
$55,000 in 1912 is the equivalent of $1,475,172.70 in today's dollars.
So let's stop and chat a second about D.W. Griffith, because I can't just like glaze over him.
Okay.
First off, he is known in film history, cinematic history, as like the filmmaker. He is the first person who makes what we would consider today a feature-length film.
Okay.
It's a movie called The Birth of a Nation. Have you heard of that?
Birth of a Nation. I have heard of that.
You probably don't know it very well, but I actually had to watch it when I was in film school. It's awful. It is this story that is set, like it's filmed in like 1915 or 16 or whatever.
Okay.
But it's set in the Reconstruction era-ish, like Civil War-ish time. And it portrays the South as the sympathetic part of the Civil War, and that Black people are these, vicious people. I don't actually, if I were being honest with you, they do not portray Black folks. He does not portray Black folks as people.
Yikes.
It's awful. It's horrendous. It is a really brutal film.
I think that's probably why I heard about it. It was in another class. We were talking about the racial context of it.
Well, and even when you're like just a casual viewer of something like the Oscars or something, they'll occasionally bring it up because it's really well known. So it actually portrays the KKK as like the saviors of the United States.
Gross.
They're unsung heroes. It actually, his movie is credited with the rebirth of the KKK. So
that
anyway,
paints the picture very well.
And what's really I find interesting is that Alice made a film a couple years prior to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation called A Fool and His Money. And it is the first film that we know of that has an all-Black cast.
Really?
And according to the documentary I watched, Be Natural, according to what they said, is that like initially she had 2 white stars and then 2 black stars. And the 2 white stars, when they found out they were going to be paired with a Black actor,
they didn't want to do it.
They were like, I'm not fucking doing that.
Yeah.
And so she was like, fine. And she fired them and just hired 2 other black actors, and then decided to just have the whole cast be Black. And like, so literally start to finish, they're like, it's an entirely Black cast. And I wouldn't say that by today's standards, we would consider it a very progressive film, but it's not like Birth of a Nation.
Yeah.
It is a film about this guy who is kind of down on his luck. He's not a wealthy guy, and he sees this beautiful upper class girl, and he's like, I want to be her person. And he does something. I couldn't find the full film, so I've only seen clips of it. He does something in order to get some kind of money. Yeah. And he buys a really fancy car, and he drives by her house, and she doesn't notice him. He drives by again until she notices him, and she does, and she was like, oh, maybe I do like you. You're rich now. And then I think he got the money through gambling and then lost it again through gambling. It's not quite clear, but it kind of looks that way.
Yeah.
And so then he's poor again, and she's like, bye, sucker. And then like goes back to the rich boyfriend.
Sounds like an interesting story. I'd watch it.
It's a comedy. A lot of her stuff was comedy.
Okay.
It was actually really funny. There's this one I watched called The Drunken Mattress.
Okay.
And it's a literal mattress like falling down and rolling down hills all over France.
That is wacko.
And occasionally you can tell that there is a human being inside the mattress.
No.
It's like having to do this. I was like, that poor fucker.
He got hazard pay.
He's inside of a mattress rolling down a hill. And like some
I
of
made
it,
it, Mom. I got into a movie. What did you play? A mattress.
See, Mom, that's me. Honey, I can't see. I'm inside it. And some of those scenes are like these giant French hills, like cobblestone streets, and he has to like fall down them.
I can't breathe.
I'm gonna show you some clips of that.
Please.
The drunken mattress.
Okay, let me get my composure. I'm crying again. Oh my God. I love a good rolling down the hill scene.
Yeah, everybody loves a good rolling down the hill scene, especially if they're in a mattress.
Yes.
So in 1913, Herbert's contract, he's still going with Gaumont this whole time.
Oh my gosh.
Because she's running Solax herself.
I feel like they have him like at a desk with like no papers on it and no pencils, nothing. He just sits there and stares.
Well, he must have been doing all right because he was still the head of production at Gaumont in the studio. Which at this point they had a big studio, so I think they were also in Fort Lee, New Jersey. So in 1913, his contract with Gaumont is up, and so Alice, shrug emoji, makes him the president of Solax.
What?
So like the speculation is that she really wanted to be more of the creative side, and so she put him in charge of like the business side so that she could continue writing, like, producing, and directing.
To concentrate.
So then things get real weird. Okay, so something's not right in their marriage. It's not real clear what's going on at this time. But Herbert abruptly resigns as the Solax president within like 3 months of being made the president, and then starts up his own production company called Blaché Features.
That sounds kind of weird. I wonder if he was just like, what I kind of like could imagine is that she's like, you need to step up. You need to do this. Yeah, I made you the president. Make sure to take care of it. And how we know that he's not always the best at what he does. Maybe he was messing up. And
maybe
she was
he wasn't
correcting.
up to her standard.
Yeah, and she was correcting him. So he was like, I can do this. I'm going to do it without you over here.
There's nothing that I could see that had like specifics about what was going on in their marriage, but there was definitely not good things. I mean, who would do that?
Yeah, if things were fine.
Who would create a rival company? And of course, Blaché Features rents out Solax's facilities. So he's using her facilities, her actors, her crew, her inventory, her cameras, like all of that stuff. And eventually takes over the production schedule and it makes Solax basically obsolete because Blaché Features is using it the entire time.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. That's so undermining.
So Solax is replaced by Blaché Features, but I can't get a read on this because then they just continue working together and alternate who's directing. So she'll direct some films, he'll direct some films, she'll direct some films, he'll direct some films.
It's odd.
Isn't this odd?
Yeah.
I feel like they must have had some kind of love-hate marriage. You know those people that are constantly pushing, pulling?
Yeah.
And like that's how they get off.
Types, they're a little bit more...
Yeah, a little more hot-headed.
Yeah.
So around this time, if you know your history, you're already aware that we're hitting World War I and the Depression. Mm-hmm. So Herbert and Alice are now hitting the Depression and nobody's going to see films because nobody's got any disposable income. Mm-hmm. So they're struggling to make ends meet. Production has slowed way down. So they're starting to rent out their facility to other companies. And this is where we're going to get to how Hollywood happens.
Okay.
So I'm sure you've heard of Kodak.
The film, yes.
Yes. So Edison, as in Edison.
Yeah.
He's the first person, that makes a camera or whatever. So Edison joins forces with Kodak Eastman. And they form this trust in which they basically refuse to sell film and cameras to anyone that doesn't belong to their trust. So if you want to get some Kodak film, which was like the best in the game, then you had to be part of this trust. And the trust meant that you had to pay dues. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't, then they wouldn't sell to you and they'd basically blacklist you. You would have to
so illegal.
you'd have to find all of your equipment, your film, whatever, independently.
Wow.
Which in the Great Depression is fucking impossible because Kodak at this point, Kodak and Edison have like eaten up all of those small companies that might have been doing that. So, in order to get out from underneath this trust, a whole bunch of the film companies move west and they go to California.
Because they don't want to be part of it.
Yeah, well, because it's the only way to get out from underneath their monopoly.
Yeah.
Because then someone else can start creating shit over on the West Coast.
The other side.
And since the entire film industry was based in New Jersey, that was the only way to get away from them.
So it basically like ruined the industry for the East Coast.
Yes. It decimated the industry in the East Coast.
I had no clue about that.
It eventually makes Edison go out of business.
Really?
Yeah, because the whole industry moves away from them. I mean, they just shot themselves in the foot.
What a bad mistake. Yeah.
So this incredible financial strain is hitting everybody. And it's also, you can imagine the strain it would put on a marriage.
Yeah.
So her marriage is crumbling. The company is crumbling. The economy has bottomed out. Everything is bad.
Yeah.
This is like the low point of their life. And Herbert, this is where we finally know some specifics, is a fucking womanizer. He's always sleeping with actresses, always doing shady ass shit. And she knows.
This reminds me very much of like Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, them creating together, but then the affairs and
yes,
the volatileness, but they couldn't get away from each other.
Exactly. And destroying each other. So Herbert decides to leave for good, and he moves to Los Angeles to pursue his film career in Hollywood. And it's in 1919 that Alice is hired to write and direct what would be her last film, which is called Tarnished Reputations. She's offered $2,000 for a 6-week production schedule, and it ends up taking 10 weeks. So she really gets paid hardly anything, $200 a week. During the filming of the movie, the Spanish flu pandemic shows up.
Oh, no.
And while she's filming it, a whole bunch of people on set filming get the Spanish flu, including Alice. 4 of the crew members die.
Oh my goodness.
And she nearly dies. And in fact, Herbert comes to New York and sees her and is like, holy shit. And he promptly moves her to Los Angeles. Because you know that theory that like, oh, warmer weather is good.
Yeah, you need to get outside and oxygen's good for you.
Yeah. And so he brings her to California, sets her up in a bungalow that he pays for. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're right about the Diego and Frida.
The Spanish flu to California.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Spanish flu was everywhere. And it is very much like today.
Yeah.
He sets her up in this bungalow, and then he hires her to work as a directing assistant on a couple of films, which is basically like throwing her a bone, you know, which I find to be kind. But I do think that comparison to Diego and Frida is pretty apt.
Yeah.
So she's forced to return to New Jersey when Solax is under auction, selling all of its equipment and the studio.
Heartbreaking.
They had a fire a couple years earlier, which really put basically that's the coffin closing.
Yeah.
They are forced into bankruptcy, and in 1922, the couple officially divorces. And Alice decides then to take her children and move back to France. Once she's in France, she's like, you know, I basically started the French film industry. I'm going to go back and I'm going to be back in the film industry in France. This is my home. So she applies for job after job after job and nothing. No one will hire her. And in fact, some people, when she's like, but I founded the Gaumont production company. I did this, I did that. I made the first movie. They're like, sure, sweetheart.
Yikes.
They don't believe her, outright don't believe her, or they think that she's just exaggerating. She's inflating her own status. So the film industry also at this point is like drastically changing from when she first started in 1896, as you might imagine. But it's since then that all of these small little independent studios and whatever have started to fold because investment bankers and shit have started to see that you can make money in the film industry. So that input of capitalism is also a direct straight line of patriarchy.
Yeah.
And basically because prior to this, not only was Alice one of the heads and one of the most popular film directors and whatever, but all through the early 1900s, women were making films all over the places. There was tons of female directors. And it's in this 1915, 1920 era that ends.
There's a regression.
There's only basically 3 working women after this who are directing films. One of them is Lois Weber, which I'm going to pause for a second and just tell you about fucking Lois Weber, who I'd heard of. Lois Weber was hired by Alice, and Alice mentored her, and then she fucking had an affair with Herbert.
Oh my gosh. What a backstabbing.
Yeah.
Brr.
Yeah. Ugh. Anyway. So Alice is like not able to make ends meet. She cannot get a job. She's having a really hard time surviving financially.
I would have a breakdown. I would mentally break.
And Herbert's supposed to pay alimony. He's never fucking paying it. So she's constantly trying to fight with him over that. She's writing him letters. And yet he's still able to go direct films and live his life as if he's never had a wife and 2 children. So Alice becomes convinced that she's like, I have to reconstruct my legacy. People have to know I did these things. So during the 1920s, she spends a whole lot of time trying to fly to and from the United States looking for copies of her films. And she doesn't find any of them. Now, I want to just put this number out there. She made at least 1,000 films.
And she can't find a single one.
No, not one. Even at the Library of Congress, where they're copyrighted and they're supposed to be archived, but none of them ever were actually archived. So the family's financial plight is getting worse and worse and worse. Alice is selling off her jewelry just to try to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And in a weird case of history repeating itself, Alice's daughter Simone becomes the family's breadwinner.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy that it's like the same. What did her daughter end up doing?
So her daughter starts out, I think, doing like secretary type work. And I'm going to talk about her job a little bit later. She becomes something pretty impressive. So in 1930, Alice hears that Leon Gaumont is publishing a history of the Gaumont Company. And she's like, finally, I'm going to have all of this information. It's going to show what I did. And she eagerly reads it, but it fails to mention anything that was made before 1907. And it leaves most of Alice's contributions to the success of Gaumont out. So immediately she's like, hey, Leon.
If you're doing a history, I'm part of that.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Where am I? And he's like, oh, you know what? Will you write down your recollections of the beginnings of the company and we can add that?
Okay.
So she spends this time like writing all of this stuff down about how the company got founded and the movies that she was making and all of this stuff. Unfortunately, before that could ever get printed, Leon Gaumont dies.
Oh, no. So she can't get it in there.
No. So it's around like the 1930s, 40s, that people start to make films, documentaries about the beginning of the film industry. And they're making specific films sometimes about Gaumont or Solax. And even the films about Solax only mention Herbert.
She's been robbed. Yeah.
He didn't even own it.
He didn't do it. Yeah.
So
this is fucked up.
He was the president of Solax for 3 fucking months.
Yeah.
That's it. So even some of her most famous films, like this movie she made called Esmeralda, which was the first film ever directed in the new Gaumont studio that she made, and it was based on The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Okay.
That film The Life of Christ, and even The Cabbage Fairy that you watched were all credited as being directed by men.
Who's writing this?
These film historians. And part of it is because that Gaumont catalog that came out had her assistants listed as the directors.
Why?
Because she wasn't there to correct it.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And once she was there to correct it, they were like, well, who cares?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. And they don't even mention that she was head of Gaumont production from 1897 to 1907.
Mm-hmm.
She's literally been absolutely fucking erased.
Yeah.
Like she didn't exist. Can you imagine feeling that way?
I would be devastated. It would be hard for me not to do something to myself.
Oh, yeah. The depression would be so intense. So she's, to her credit, trying her goddamn damnedest to correct these erroneous reports and histories. She's writing to film historians who've published incorrect records, magazines and journals. In fact, Lois Weber is credited as the first female filmmaker.
Oh my gosh. I bet Herbert got her in there.
So Simone is also starting to do this. So she gets in on this letter writing campaign as well and is trying to help restore her mom's legacy. Alice also starts writing her own memoirs because she thought, okay, if they're not going to correct their shit, I'm going to write my own.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so she starts writing her own memoirs, detailing her life and everything that she did and all the movies that she made. And no one will publish it. And by this time, Simone is actually a really successful person. She works for the U.S. embassies in Europe and in fact ends up in Vichy during World War II.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So finally in the 1950s, Alice begins a correspondence with Léon Gaumont's son, Louis. Louis realizes, fuck, this sucks.
Yeah.
We did her wrong. And he's like, I'm going to do my best to correct this, Alice. I know that you were here from the start. So he publicly acknowledges the role that she played in 1954 at a speech in Paris that he gives that he called Madame Alice Guy-Blaché, the first woman filmmaker.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why, but that is the reason why suddenly people are like, oh, because it came from a man. Meanwhile,
it legitimized her.
Yeah, and she spent the last almost 30 years trying to tell people the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
So he does this great speech, credit to him, fine, whatever, but it shouldn't have taken that.
Yeah.
But apparently it does. And then the very next year, in 1955, she's given the Légion d'honneur, which is the highest honor in France.
Mm-hmm.
And she also is honored in a few French film ceremonies and featured in some documentaries in the 50s and 60s. However, she's still being dismissed and downplayed, and her role is downplayed a lot, including by this fucker, this film historian named Charles Ford. And this is what he said about her in 1975. She remained in the shadows because she didn't have sensational work. Her work was honest, honorable, likable, but nothing brilliant.
Oh my gosh.
So, 1965.
Gosh, we're in the 60s now.
I know.
And it's just getting worse.
In 1965, Alice and Simone moved back to New Jersey. And Alice dies not long after that, in 1968, at the age of 94. At the time of her death, Alice had located only 2 of her films and a fragment of the third. Simone, however, is like, I'm going to continue this work. I want to get my mom's legacy restored. So she pushes and pushes and pushes and finally convinces a publisher in France to publish her mom's memoirs in 1976. Woman's been writing them since the 40s, but whatever.
Wow. Took that long.
Yeah. And then Simone then sets out to get her recognition in the U.S. as well, because she started the first major studio.
Yeah.
And so she her and her sister-in-law so her brother's wife, Simone and her sister-in-law sit down and start translating her mother's memoirs into English.
Okay.
And they are able to get that published in 1986.
Yeeks.
And
now we're in the 80s.
I know. And in the meantime, there's a retrospective on women filmmakers at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And the woman who's in charge of it knows who Alice is and credits Solax as the start of women in American film. Mm-hmm. So at least somebody's saying something.
Yeah.
And throughout the 80s and 90s and early aughts, there are documentaries and there are a few books that are made, all of which are really, like, almost all of them are something like The Untold Story or The Forgotten Story or the overlooked person. And they're all trying to get her recognition, but she still remains pretty unknown, even to people enmeshed in film. Mm-hmm. Like, I could name the Thalberg era, D.W. Griffith. I could name you so many directors who were men, studio heads, executives, Kodak, Easton, the Lumiere brothers. Mm-hmm. I know all of these names, and I was a first-year film student, and I knew all of them because I had to. This person was never, ever mentioned. So there is a growing number of folks who've been trying to find her films and uncover them.
They have to be somewhere.
Oh, they are.
Or did they purposely destroy them or something?
I mean, a lot of them were on nitrate, and nitrate is extremely flammable.
Yeah.
In fact, it burns underwater.
Oh, that's more than extremely flammable. That is nuts.
Yeah. So basically, they often are destroyed.
Yeah.
Because something starts on fire and it burns the whole damn place down.
Yeesh.
So the buzz, though, about Alice actually ends up getting her a posthumous induction into the Directors Guild of America in 2012.
Oh, wow.
And that is still not enough, right? Mm-hmm. Because she basically founded the industry in a lot of ways. So in 2017, a filmmaker named Pamela Green starts making a documentary about her and interviewed dozens of filmmakers, actors, writers, film historians, etc. And almost none of them, when she asked the question, do you know who Alice Guy-Blaché is? They say,
Who?
Who? No, I don't know who that is. Even her own fucking descendants.
Oh, no.
Are unaware that she was the first woman filmmaker.
The undermining and the erasure of her. I feel like these men like to be validated by other men and write about other men and look at us and look at what we did. And erasing her from this history is just like trying to boost them that we did this. We created this industry.
Yep. We're the titans of film.
Yeah, we are the ones that did it. And then this person doesn't matter.
So Pamela's documentary actually is pretty incredible as a movie in general. I really enjoyed it. It's called Be Natural, The Untold Story of Alice Guy-Blaché, and it went on to debut at the 2018 Cannes Film Festival. It also was at Telluride, the New York Film Festival, and the London BFI Film Festival, and it also won the Best Documentary at the Vancouver International Women in Film Festival.
I would love to see this film.
It's so good. You can actually watch it for free on Canopy, Kanopy.
Okay.
If you have a library card.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a ton of really great stuff on there. And in 2019, the New York Times featured Alice Guy-Blaché in their Overlooked No More series. We now know that Alice wrote, directed, produced, or supervised more than 1,000 films. Alice pioneered film techniques such as double exposures, the use of split screens, and special effects. She was one of the first directors to use children and live animals. Her films took on topics like anti-Semitism, immigration, and labor. She highlighted sexual inequality and put women in leading and empowering roles on screen. Above all, she was not just a player in early cinema, she was a founder of it. Her name should be as well known as that of D.W. Griffith or Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. And hopefully now, because of the work of many women like Simone, her daughter, to Pamela Green, to Jodie Foster, perhaps she will be. I want to leave with a quote from her from an interview in 1963. "There is nothing connected with the staging of a motion picture that a woman cannot do as easily as a man, and there is no reason why she cannot completely master every technicality of the art."
What an amazing person.
Yeah, Pamela Green, the director of Be Natural, has in fact found a lot of her films.
Good.
One of them, that one I told you about, The Fool and His Money,
Yeah.
that one was actually found at a flea market garage sale. A guy had it just in his...
They probably just boxed it up and put it out, and it got spread around and not documented, not cataloged.
Absolutely. When Pamela tracks down one of her descendants, he has a whole treasure trove of her stuff.
Really?
Yeah, it's incredible. Like, I can't remember what it's called. There was this, it's kind of hard to describe it, but it's like this big, almost like a wheel type thing.
Okay.
And it's just a series of photos. And you flip the photos really fast and they basically are a film.
Oh, okay.
It's like, you know how you'd have flip books
Yeah.
like that? But this was like, it's massive and it's like film. It's real neat to look at. And I mean, he just found really incredible stuff there that he had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
And this filmmaker is like going through these things and is like, oh my God.
I can take this off your hands if you want.
What'd you think?
I'm sad I didn't know.
Yeah.
That I didn't know her. I'm so like excited to hear the story. There's things that I just had no idea about. I feel for her though. That had to been torture. And then to be connected to this person, which I wouldn't put it above him that he did things purposely to derail her.
I know it seemed like they had a pretty toxic marriage. They go into that just a slightly bit more in the documentary, including showing some of the things that she wrote in letters to him and things about him.
Kind of little windows into their relationship, probably.
She was actually interviewed, and I think it was like 1963 or 65, which she died in 68. So shortly before, she was pretty old. She's in her 90s. And they include clips of it in the documentary, and it was fascinating to see her talk about it and talk about what she did and whatnot. And the person who's interviewing her is thankfully well aware of her legacy and the fact that she's not as well known as she should be. Mm-hmm. You can just see the, like, I don't know, the disappointment, the pain.
Yeah, I can imagine.
She also, she was talking about how people will often denigrate the films of that time, like how shoddy they look and whatever. And she was like, you have no idea what we were working with, folks.
Yeah, they're like paper and
hand cranked.
Yeah.
Those cameras were hand cranked. You had to stand there the whole time and fucking crank that motherfucker.
Brilliant.
So, she was incredible. She was an amazing person. I'm so glad that I could spend the time to actually do this properly.
I am too. I'm glad that you got to do it.
I have a whopping 10 sources.
Oh my gosh. I can see the shadow on the paper.
Yeah.
It's more than half a page.
I have already mentioned the documentary Be Natural, but I'm going to say it again because it's worth watching. One of her biographers is a woman named Alison McMahan. And so I did read excerpts from her biography, but also she wrote a smaller bio on the Women Film Pioneers Project, which if you're into women in the film industry, you have to go to this website. I've been using it for a couple of years to do stuff on there. I mean, basically, I could just do a whole series of women filmmakers every week because there are so many of them. I'd love to talk about Dorothy Arzner. She's on my list. Lois Weber is on my list, despite the fact that I have misgivings about her. And in fact, one of the other things that when Alice goes to California and works with Herbert on a couple of films, he's working with Alla Nazimova. And Alla Nazimova was this incredible actress, but also eventually made films of her own, who was this incredible lesbian who slept with like people that we've talked about in the past.
Oh, wow.
It's a small world. I use Wikipedia a little bit, but I also had read the Overlooked No More from the New York Times. There was a cool little article on mental floss by Valerie Demanet. It's a very long name that has a lot of D's and B's. And that was called Alice Guy-Blaché, Forgotten Film Pioneer. I used Alice's website. There was a very interesting critique of the Be Natural documentary on the LA Review of Books called The Astonishing and Multiple Achievements of Alice Guy-Blaché by Sarah Gleeson-White. I also used her Self 360 Women Pioneer series, Alice Guy-Blaché by Lyvia Feraco, and 2 YouTube videos that were pretty fun. A University of Nebraska-Lincoln one called Frame by Frame Alice Guy-Blaché, where there's a film professor talking about her, and a channel called GammaRay, Alice Guy-Blaché, the greatest filmmaker you do not know.
Extensive.
Yes. I tried to watch as many of her films as I possibly could. There was one that was really funny and very strange. And it was like a satirical look at what men think feminism will do.
Oh,
and
that'd be interesting.
It was. It had all of the men dressed in men's clothes, all of the women dressed in women's clothes, but the men did all of the quote unquote traditional women's work. So they're like making dinner and, sewing and stuff like that. And the women are out like, and the women are all like butching up, right? Like they're walking with a swagger. At one point, one woman like pinches a man's butt as he walks by, and another woman comes to his defense and is like, that's inappropriate.
That's interesting.
It's pretty funny, honestly. And like the one woman is like sexually aggressive towards her husband, and he's like, no, not now.
I have a headache.
and it I'm sure was played for laughs in a lot of ways, but it really was, I think, it was making fun of what men think feminism is.
Exactly.
And that was pretty great.
Well, thank you so much. I loved it. It was wonderful. And I definitely want to see that documentary.
You should. And I would love if we could, throughout the week after this post a couple of her films that people can watch on our at least on our Facebook for sure. Well, thank you for letting me do that.
Oh, no worries. I'm so glad that this feels good. This feels, I know that doing the 2-person per episode was awesome as well, but I do enjoy this. I feel like it's like I'm being read a story.
Yeah, and I hope it's engaging for you all who are listening, but it feels really engaging to me sitting here doing it. Like I was hanging on to your every word last time because I wasn't thinking about, I got to make sure I mention this when I'm doing my person. I wasn't distracted. I got to just listen and be engaged.
And chill.
I hope you feel that way too.
I do.
Good.
I liked it a lot. Can't wait to see some of the imagery.
Okay, Lucas. Thank you so much. This one's an editing nightmare for you today. Thank you, Lucas, for all your work. And thank you to Jennifer Finch of L7 for our lovely theme music. And thank you to everyone who's listening. And for those of you who didn't hear last time, make sure that you go on our Instagram, whatever, and find our Patreon. Our website also has our Patreon at idkher.com. We would love to get some more supporters. Thank you to those of you who've already signed up. You are able to help us cover the costs of hosting our show on Libsyn. And we'd love to get more so that we can do more, upgrade our equipment, pay Lucas more. That's one of the things I'd really like to do.
We have goals.
We do. We need your help in getting to those goals. So,
Till next time.
Till next time.